The Retrospec Weekender Tour is an all-around paddleboard that's as comfortable and capable for beginners to get their sea legs under them as it is to paddle a handful of miles at a time for a workout or a destination picnic. While the Weekender Tour is not a true touring paddleboard, it does perform well as an all-around inflatable paddleboard, including the ability to go for those longer day trips without feeling slow or pushy. To top things off, Retrospec has bundled this capable all-around paddleboard with a great accessory kit and managed to provide it all at an excellent price that's easy on your wallet. The Weekender Tour uses Retrospec's premium AeroGlide Fusion construction for improved rigidity and durability compared to their standard Weekender paddleboard. The Tour is made with a standard 6-inch knitted drop stitch core, and it has a dual layer Fusion PVC shell. This helps keep the paddleboard light and rigid. The board is built using a standard glued rail construction with an outer PVC rail layer for additional rigidity and durability. While there's often a correlation between paddleboard cost and rigidity, it's not always the case. The Retrospec Weekender Tour did quite well in our rigidity test, bending just over 1.8 inches with 170 pounds in the standing area of our board. This is just a little bit more bend than our average 1.6 inch result. On the water, I didn't notice any real flex or bend while I stood or paddled normally on the Weekender Tour, although I could begin to feel a little bit of flex as I put more effort into my paddle stroke to go faster. While it's not the most rigid inflatable paddleboard I've used, it does have a good rigidity profile, and it performs better than most inflatable paddleboards in its price range. I personally classify the Retrospec Weekender Tour as more of an all-around paddleboard than a touring paddleboard. It does have a great set of features that allow it to be used in a variety of different ways, and the size is not so discerning that you can't use it for casual cruising as well as going a little bit farther and a little bit faster. On the deck, you'll find 2 cargo bungees, a comfortable brushed EVA deck pad with a raised kick pad at the tail of the board, 3 handles, a GoPro action mount on the front of the board, paddle holders on the right side of the board, and attachment points for kayak seats on each side of the board. And on the bottom, there's a standard 3-fin setup using slide lock fin boxes. The Weekender Tour does come as a complete kit, including a nylon backpack, a hand pump, 3 fins, a coiled ankle leash, a repair kit, a waterproof phone bag, and an aluminum paddle. This is a fantastic kit for this priced paddleboard. However, the aluminum paddle does leave a little bit to be desired. It's heavy to use for long days on the water, and aluminum has a tendency to bend either during heavy use on the water or accidentally during transportation and setup. On the water, the Weekender Tour does feel more like an all-around paddleboard compared to a dedicated touring paddleboard, thanks to its wider 32-inch width and its square tail for extra stability. With a slightly longer shape and a 3-fin setup, the Weekender Tour can be a little tricky to turn using basic strokes and takes an average of nearly 9 forward sweep strokes to make a complete circle from a standstill. That is definitely more than what we see in a typical all-around paddleboard. However, when you go to our 10-stroke tracking test, we found that the Weekend Tour deviated off course by an average of around 12 degrees after 10 paddle strokes on a single side. That's on the good side for an all-around, but it's definitely not quite as good as we would expect from a fully dedicated touring SUP. And that makes sense when you consider the board's overall size and shape. The speed profile of the Weekender Tour is nice, but it's nothing like a dedicated touring board. I was able to hit a surprisingly fast 5.7 mile per hour maximum speed while doing a sprint test, but only for a very short amount of time, and it took a lot of effort. But casual paddling at around 25 strokes a minute moves the Weekender Tour at a nice 3.3 mile per hour average. It is relatively efficient on the water and has a glide length of about 1.7 board lengths per stroke. That's on the higher side of efficiency for all-around paddleboards, but not quite as efficient as a dedicated touring SUP. Straddling this line between all-around and touring typically creates a very versatile paddleboard, and the Retrospec Weekender Tour is one of my most recommended budget paddleboards. I really do like this board and think it fills a really good spot for people who are looking for an affordable way to get into the sport without necessarily being stuck with just a slow, wide cruiser that's only good for hanging out around the beach. And while it's not what I would consider to be a true touring board, there's no reason why you couldn't load the Weekender Tour up with everything you need for a day or even an overnight to explore your local lakes and rivers. And with the price point of this board, you'll definitely have enough left over to make sure you can get out and explore all those fun places.